Hi, everybody. Welcome. We are going to get started in just a moment. This is the first webinar of our next Colorado Webinar Safe Routes to School series. So thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We're going to be talking today about building culture and community through safe routes to school. We have a wonderful featured presenter from Denver to talk about some great work that they've been doing when it comes to their safe routes to school program. We also have a few new accessibility features in our Colorado webinar series. So of course we have the captions at the bottom, and then I'll also be doing an image ID of any pictures that I'm showing in the slide deck. So if you hear me describe what you're actually seeing on the slide, that is a new ADA feature that we're incorporating into our webinars. So this is just our first intro slide. There's a group of 5 students who are walking down a sidewalk, presumably to or from school. So just to, again, kick us off, I think a lot of you already know about the partnership, but in case you don't, we are a national organization. Our mission is to advance safe walking, biking, and rolling, both to schools, but also other destinations like, parks and grocery stores and libraries, and are really trying to advance the health and well-being of people of all ages, backgrounds, abilities, disabilities. And this image shows, looks to be an adult hugging a child who is riding a bike. So to kick us off, if you could please in the chat box just share, say a quick hello, share who you are, where you're coming from today, your connection to Safe Routes to School, and then we'd love to know if you have engaged any teachers in your Safe Routes program, and what has been successful with teacher engagement and what has been a bit challenging. This is going to come up a little bit later on in Priscilla's presentation. So we'd love to hear a little bit from you all just about what your engagement has looked like when it comes to working with teachers and safe routes to school. So I'll give you all a minute to jump in the chat and say a quick hello to us. And let me make sure that the chat is disabled here. Yes, I see Catherine from Washington. Thanks for joining us. And again, the image ID here on the right is there's a teacher standing in front of the classroom who's talking to a group of students who are sitting at their desks. See who is here with us today. I see some familiar names. Maria Reina from Georgia, nice to see you. See some Colorado folks in here. So again, where are you joining from? And then also, how have you engaged teachers in Safe Routes programs? What has been successful and what's been challenging? Feel free to drop that into the chat box too. So we'll give people a few more minutes to log on here. And then we will go ahead and get started. Now the chat is booming. I feel like as soon as the first person jumps in, then it's just like opens up the floodgates, which is nice. I see some new people to Safe Routes, some people who I know before. So thanks for joining us if this is your first time. Thanks for rejoining us if you've been here before. And again, feel free to continue, sharing in the chat where you're from and what teacher engagement has looked like in your Safe Routes program. So any tips, tricks, anecdotes, feel free to drop those into the chat box as we move through the presentation today. So just a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. If you could put the chat will stay open, so feel free to put any, comments or resource links in the chat box. Please save questions for the Q&A box. We'll have plenty of time at the end to ask questions, and you all can ask questions of Priscilla. And then also this webinar is being recorded and slides will be available after the presentation. So I'll make sure that you all get those out as well. Just a little bit that I'm seeing in the chat box as far as teacher engagement, definitely some challenges getting, teachers, communicating with teachers, kind of getting them into that initial conversation about safe routes to school. There are a lot of teachers who don't have a lot of capacity to run, different programs or do extracurricular things, but it seems like you all have had some success with engaging PE teachers, which is awesome. Working with teachers during after school programs, that's always a great idea. working with teachers to address some infrastructure improvements, which is exciting and something that we'll talk about. Having teachers encourage kids to walk and bike to school. So yeah, there are ways to reach our teachers even in the midst of some of the challenges that are happening. So one other quick housekeeping item before I jump back into our content areas, I wanted to, again, do a quick reminder about the Safe Routes to School conference. Registration will open, I believe, in the next few weeks or so, but we launched our conference website. As you all know, we'll be in beautiful Fort Collins, Colorado. So those of you who I've seen, via webinar for all of these months, I'm excited to see you all in person in Fort Collins this October. So keep an eye out in your email inboxes for more information about the conference. And this is just a picture of some wonderful students who are riding their bikes outside of their school blacktop. And these are students from Fort Collins, Colorado. And we are also accepting nominations for the Hub Smith Safe Routes Champion Award. And we're accepting nominations through May 30th. So we're looking for you all actually to nominate a Safe Routes champion who's really done a lot to advance equity and inclusion in their Safe Routes program. And this award is named after the founding director of the Safe Routes Partnership. She was very passionate about Safe Routes to School. We want to honor her legacy by offering this award. And more information is available about this on our website. So any questions about the conference, registration, the Hub Smith Award, again, think about a champion who you think would, be a great person to honor and celebrate at the conference. They'll get free registration, airfare, and hotel. So we're really excited to see your nominations and see that person in Fort Collins with us this fall. And yeah, this is a picture of Deb Hub Smith on her bike. So looking forward to honoring her. Okay, so back to the topic at hand, engaging teachers and really building a culture of active transportation in your school district or in your schools that you're working with for your Safe Routes to School programs. So of course, you always start out every Colorado webinar talking about our community engagement guide. We'll be talking a lot about teacher engagement today. And those of you who are familiar with this resource know this is our community engagement framework that outlines some best practices. It has guiding questions, lots of great Colorado programs that are featured. It has a really heavy emphasis on equity. And of course, here's a picture of the guide here on the right-hand side. And today we're actually going to talk about a few of the parts of the community engagement framework. I'd say mainly that partnership piece, so really partnering with schools and teachers, but also, other best practices for engaging school communities and Safe Routes to School. So, all the things that Priscilla will talk about are definitely relevant to what we talk about in the Colorado Community Engagement Guide. So one more quick chat question before I jump in. I'm curious to hear from you all if there are any types of new infrastructure that have come or are coming to your community. And the follow-up question is, do people know how to use the new infrastructure? So I know that for me, anytime there's a traffic circle that's installed, it's always chaos. People are like, what do I do here? I don't know what's going on. Or, a protected bike lane, or those hawk signals that aren't like a traditional, traffic signal. So I'm curious to hear from you all if in your communities there's any new infrastructure, and then also if people actually know how to use it. So if you want to, again, pop back into the chat box and just add some, new things that might be appearing in your community or that have appeared in your community. And if people actually know how to use new infrastructure, it's great that it's there. And we want to make sure that people, know how to use it correctly. So I see some traffic circles that are coming in. Yeah, many styles of lights are confusing. Yeah, people don't necessarily know, what you're supposed to do with each, at the different intersection with different lights. Some new road diets, removing travel lanes. Yeah, it can get it can get a little bit confusing. But there are things that we can do as new infrastructure comes in to really ensure that the infrastructure piece is there and that the education piece is there. And that's kind of part of why, Denver wanted to, do the program that they are doing, knowing that there are a bunch of capital improvements that were coming, and there's an opportunity to, engage teachers and do some more education around this new infrastructure that's coming. So when we talk about the 6Cs, we really think about this comprehensive approach, but again, there's a real opportunity to pair that engineering piece with the education piece. So again, it's great that we're getting all this infrastructure. I think that there will be more to come, but how can Safe Routes really, plan thoughtfully around, incorporating the engineering with the infrastructure? And here we have the two little drawings of the, kids walking across a crosswalk, and then another drawing of a teacher in front of their classroom talking about safe routes. And Priscilla will talk a bit more about how the teachers she's worked with have encouraged students to participate in safe routes to school. So when we really think about, planning for upcoming infrastructure and educating the public about it, it's really around this larger topic of building an active transportation culture. And I think that Safe Routes to School is another important factor and an important part of building an active transportation culture, both within a school and, within a community. So when we really think about, building an active transportation culture, we're asking questions like, what behavioral changes would you like to see as a result of this new infrastructure? I assume that, more kids walking and biking would be one thing that we would like to see. There are also some questions around, like, what do people actually need to embrace change? So including the educational piece, what other pieces do people really need to make sure that they can, be a part of an active transportation culture? And then who else needs to be involved? So we can't just do this all on our own. Do we need to involve, teachers, school staff, city staff, other community members, because everybody really does play a role, in building and changing culture. On the right-hand side, we have a man riding a bike next to a young child riding a bike, and I believe they're doing a turn signal. They'll correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not the best with my bike signals. So when we think about culture change and active transportation culture, what are we actually talking about? And I think that you all, know a lot of what this is. Of course, we want to see more kids walking, biking, and rolling, maybe some different, arrival or dismissal procedures on your school campus. Bike and pedestrian education incorporated into the curriculum. And again, Priscilla will kind of talk a bit about what that's looked like in Denver. Also, people using the new infrastructure correctly. So if there's, a walking lane or protected bike lane or a traffic circle or a hawk signal, making sure that people can actually, use those new features successfully. And then, active transportation really becoming the norm. So, that's just, kids just walk to school. That's what they do, or they just, bike to school or roll to school. It becomes a common, a common practice. And here on the right-hand side, we have a group of students who are walking past what looks like a crossing guard, either heading to or from school. And just a few equity considerations when we think about culture change as well. So we know that cultural norms vary, even transportation norms vary. So it might be really common for some people, to walk, bike, or roll to school, and might not be as common in other communities. So just keeping that in mind as well. Of course, recognizing the history of a community when some of these new infrastructure changes come, or there are new conversations about walking, biking, and rolling. Understanding what travel has looked like in a community can really help get more people, on board. Making your materials culturally relevant, and that can include everything from, accessible materials and, a person's preferred language, to, having materials that come from a trusted messenger. We talk about this a lot with high school programs, having, teens talk to other teens instead of an adult talk to a teen. That can be a more effective way of getting somebody on board. Of course, consulting your trusted community partners and leaders, and also recognizing that, change takes time. So, we know that infrastructure can take a long time, but even getting people to understand how to use it correctly, that can also take time as well. And also just being able to meet people where they are and knowing that there will be people who, do make mistakes or might not understand, but really having some, patience and being that guiding hand can be a helpful part of building an active transportation culture in a school or in a community. And on the right-hand side, we have a picture of what looks like an older adult walking next to a young person, and they are, hugging each other and taking a stroll down a nice little path there, it looks like. And then, of course, what do people really need to embrace change? So accessible information, they need that trusted messenger, a safe space to try something new, to learn and to make mistakes, that encouragement. So Priscilla will talk a bit about how the teachers she's worked with are really high on that, and that and the encouragement piece of Safe Routes to School. And then other essential needs being met. So for example, there might be, new wonderful sidewalks so kids can walk to school, but it might get really cold out during the winter. So do kids have, a coat or shoes or scarves or hats so that walking to school is actually something that's, a more pleasant and enjoyable experience? So what other essential needs might need to be met in order to, build that culture of active transportation? And of course, a sense of belonging, so feeling like Safe Routes to School is something that's for you, or this new bike lane is for you, or this hawk signal is something that's benefiting you and your, in your community, or all these other great features of Safe Routes to School, that it's really something that you can be, a part of. So making sure that that's something that's, carried through, in your program and your engagement is a really important part of building that, that culture that everyone can really, really benefit from. And of course, who do we want to involve? Like I said before, a lot of you all, kind of know who the different players are when it comes to Safe Routes to School, and making everybody feel involved and included. And Priscilla's going to talk specifically about involving teachers in Safe Routes to School and really thinking about their role in engaging communities and really helping communities build that active transportation culture. And so when we think about teacher champions, especially, we kind of ask ourselves, well, what role do teachers play in creating active transportation culture, knowing that, again, they're busy and that there are challenges? How can they still be involved in this process? We also ask ourselves, how can Safe Routes practitioners effectively engage teachers? So what are things that we can do to make it easier for them to actually, champion and support Safe Routes School programs? And how does this teacher engagement fit into the larger 6Cs framework? So, how can teachers kind of play a role in these different parts of Safe Routes programs? So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Priscilla to talk a bit about what City of Denver has done to, engage teachers in their Safe Routes to School program, and then more broadly, what the city's done to really build this active transportation culture within some of the schools that they're working with to really, make walking, biking, and rolling the norm for school travel. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Priscilla to start talking about what's happening in Denver. And Priscilla, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate having you.
Can everyone hear me okay, see me okay?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Yep, I am Priscilla. I work for the Office of Community and Business Engagement under the Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. As the Safe Routes to School program manager. I know there's like a lot of intro in there, but I've been in this position for a little over 2 years. And this is the program that I started with. We're under a different grant, but ACATS is the foundation of the work that we're currently doing. So I'm really excited to share it with you. Right. And then with this question, I just thought it would be kind of fun. If you had an unlimited budget, how would you have the most epic bike and roll event this year? Just thought it would be kind of fun to generate some ideas, but we'll come back to this at the very end. So in the next slide, we've got just a quick overview of the ACATS grant program. We worked with 3 elementary schools. The picture to the right shows the map of where they fall. In Denver, you can see that the majority of the schools fall in that inverted L or high equity area. You will also notice some additional schools on the map since we've added schools in this current iteration of the program. And we also included schools that we influenced to have their own celebrations. We will talk about that more later on in the presentation. But each school had 2 teacher champions, and they were responsible for delivering modules to their students on safe walking, biking, and rolling. And they collected student tallies and parent surveys. They filled out a progress report every semester, and this was just for us to understand if they needed anything and how they were feeling about the program. They also supported bike and walk to school events. Each teacher actually got paid to participate in the program. They received a $250 stipend for completing the training, and then $250 for completing each semester. We secured this funding by writing it into the grant. And on average, teachers spent less than 10 hours a semester on the program. The schools were chosen before I started in this position, but I know the considerations included what tier, if they were a community or neighborhood school, the overall need, and if there was already advocacy happening within the school. So we've really expanded and we've taken a lot more schools on. We're currently at 6 and we're hoping to be, we're going to be at 10 schools by this next school year. And when choosing the new schools, additional considerations included if there was any existing infrastructure projects. And then we also wanted to work with the other programs under the OCBE umbrella. So it's not just Safe Routes, we have Vision Zero, we have Teen Safe Streets, we've got the Community and Active Living Coalition, or CALC for short. And CALC, super cool. They get to work with specific communities. They work in quadrants versus Safe Routes that is citywide. And they get to build some really strong relationships within their communities. That partnership has really been essential to us inviting more schools onto the program. Because our outreach, we've done the flyers with the program information, the teacher quotes and the pictures, and we go in person to deliver it, to deliver the program information. But the most effective way we've learned that that schools will want to join the program is if we actually have a contact within the school. And so having a relationship already established has been really crucial. With the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about our modules. We have 4 modules that were created. The first 2, safe walking, rolling, and biking, and the second one, the basic helmet fit and bike check, were mandatory. So the teachers had to deliver those modules to their students, but then we also created child passenger safety and safe drop-off that were optional. I put the numbers there next to each module to show how many students were engaged with each one. And then you can see to the right there, we've got Sam the bear and Alex the beaver, and they were created specifically for these modules. So you'll see those characters in each one of the videos. We created the modules with the help of our partners. We've got Made to Walk, which focuses on walking, and Bicycle Colorado, which focuses on biking. They help develop the content and any additional materials that teachers could include in their curriculum. And they were also created in English and Spanish, not just captioning it in Spanish, but you actually hear the voiceovers for both. And they're actually available to everyone. So there's also the QR code there to the right where you can access the modules. And we've had a few nationwide who've requested these modules, so feel free to use them. And then I'm going to jump in and just give you the highlights on the data that we found, things that I thought were interesting. There's a lot, but I've tried to condense it. We'll start off with the parent surveys. I'm sure most of us, everyone on the call is familiar with these, but these are surveys that were sent out by each teacher champion to get more information on how their students were getting to and from school, the length of time it took for families to arrive to school and return home, and parents' feelings on their kids walking or biking alone. We collected about 187 surveys, and this was super beneficial in understanding the culture around the school and what the parents were worried about the most. In the next slide, I've got issues affecting parents' decision to allow or not allow their child to walk or bike. Top concerns were safety at intersections, weather or climate, distance, and then we've got violence or crime and amount of traffic along the route tied. This is cumulative between all the schools, but the same picture, but it's the same picture for each school individually as well. So this really helped us determine resources and experiences that we could bring to our families. The weather in Colorado is obviously on the chilly side and it's unpredictable. It can change in 15 minutes. So knowing this, we decided to pass out beanies and gloves during our walk and roll events. And then walk and roll also brought an opportunity to walk to school together. So this is exposing our families to what the surrounding area around the school feels like and how safe it is to walk together. I included this next piece of data to show how dramatic weather impacts our numbers. So in these charts, you can see that year 2 did bring significantly more drivers than year 1, and that is all due to weather. One of our schools has a lot of advocacy. They had so many walkers and cyclists, bikers, and that completely changed in year 2 when spring brought super rainy, snowy conditions. This wasn't during the school year, but last June it rained every single day, and that's not typical. So the weather was just doing its own thing. So we can really take this information and think about not only different resources that we might need to bring to the schools, but also it tells us that we need to work on changing the idea that we can't go out when it rains or it snows. So how do we change that perspective? And the next slide, I really thought this piece of the parent survey was super interesting on the highest grade or year of school completed, because it showed that some of our schools needed more resources than others, and or they needed more opportunities to be exposed to the work that we do. So Lincoln is our affluent school. They have way more resources and time to learn and participate in safe routes. They've got an advocate, a parent who's really big on this work. It's easier to walk and bike to Lincoln. It's high density. So that really makes it a very different school than Maxwell or Castro. And by looking at our schools through an equity lens, it can tailor our approach and our resources for each school. And the next slide, we added observations to the program, and they were added to get a picture of how the school community was traveling around each campus. And a minimum of 3 observers went to the school for both arrival and dismissal, and tallied kids and adults who utilize active transportation to get to and from school. I do not recommend this unless you have a large staff and you have the flexibility with time to adjust for weather. However, what I really found beneficial was observing the control school that was not on the program. So on the next slide, you can see we went to Beach Court, who was not on the program, just to see how kids were moving around campus. The results are grouped by school and shows how many males and females walked or biked to school. You can also see just how tiny the bars are for Beach Court compared to the 3 schools that we worked really closely with. Beach Court is also similarly affluent to Lincoln. And this really shows the impact that a Safe Routes presence has in our school. So I thought this was really cool. And also Beach Court is on the program for this coming school year. So I'm really excited to see how everything changes with us working with them more closely. We also added a pre and post test. These were provided to students to assess their knowledge before and after the modules were delivered to them. They consisted of 10 questions with a mixture of multiple choice and write-in answers. Questions were created from the modules that the students watched, and they were to take the pretest before they watched the modules and then after, and then we could really see that change in their knowledge. After the first year, we were able to improve these tests because we had data telling us what questions were maybe a little bit trickier or worded not so great. It told me I could have written them better, but then we also got feedback from our teacher champions on how to better write these questions. We made sure that the pre and post tests were both in English and Spanish because some of our kids don't speak English. So wanted to make sure that we had it in multiple languages. In the next slide, I think one more slide. There we go. For the pre and post test results, you can see on average the cumulative test results show an almost 2 full point increase in knowledge. So that was really awesome. You can also see, I put just a quick little like snapshot of the pre and post test to kind of give you an idea what that looks like. But yeah, it was really cool just seeing how after watching these videos, their knowledge base increased. That was awesome. And then in the next slide, we've got what teacher champions are saying. So I've put a couple pictures up here of our school events. You'll see teachers at a station with our swag and the spin wheel. I really love the picture in the middle. This was for Maxwell's walk and roll, where the teachers decided to do some Zumba with the kids while we all hung out in the morning. So they really get into it. And then the last picture has Dinger on it, and I'll talk more about Dinger here in a second. In the next slide, you'll see some quotes from our teachers who loved the program. We have teachers who want to stay, continue doing this work. If we have teachers move around every year, and if we have one teacher champion in the school, they tell another one of their teacher friends about it and how awesome and fun it is. And they get them to join. So you can see how excited our teachers get. They also generated like different ideas. Andres, he brought someone to teach the kids about skateboarding. So they had a lot of fun with it. So now we're going to talk more about bike, walk, and roll and the things that we were able to do to celebrate. I first want to talk about walk and roll in the next slide. This slide is just pictures. The next two slides are just pictures to show you, give you an idea of what we've done. Events typically happened for walk and roll right before school and consisted of meeting about a 5-minute walk away from the school. One of our community advocates worked on a celebrity crossing guard event, and many of our city council representatives were able to join us to celebrate. We were able to use to partner with Calc again and secure a micro grant to acquire a lot of giveaways for both events. We used some of the funds to get Dinger, the Rockies mascot, to walk the kids to school, and he was the true celebrity. I'm meeting the city council representatives at school, but everyone lost their minds about Dinger. And even the adults that were like pushing the kids aside a little bit to take pictures with Dinger, they loved him. But these extra funds really made a difference in these events, and without it, I don't think it would have been so impactful or fun. We can talk about bike and roll next, which is all, yep, perfect. So bike and roll celebrations, these typically happen 2 hours right after school. Things we did for bike and roll celebrations included working with partners and advocates to provide bike rodeos, which is just a basic like obstacle course. And we would also have basic bike repairs there so kids could bring their bikes. We would have a station with swag, activities with the spin wheel and helmet decorating station. So those were also a lot of fun. In the next slide, I have just a snapshot of what bike and roll looked like last May. I wanted to show this just because it compiles our successes for the season. One of the major successes we had with this grant is influencing other schools to do their own celebrations. So you see on that list, we've got 11 schools, 10 schools that we supported, whether helping them with a micro grant or actually going to their school and helping them with their celebration. So it's really 3 schools on the program, but we were able to influence a lot more. And last year, Colorado came in 4th amongst participating states, so that's super cool. We also, with the help of our partners at Hope Cycle, we were able to give away 37 bikes, which was huge. We raffled them off. Kids loved it. And this year we're giving away about 90. So we have doubled it, a little more than doubled it. And super excited about being able to get kids on bikes this year. In the next slide, I've got just quick celebration ideas, experiences, the walking school bus, bike bus, celebrity guest, bike rodeo, learn to ride. And then you also have the list of like giveaways that we gave out. Either we acquired it with another grant, or I guess, yeah, micro grant is also another grant, but we had to kind of pull from multiple grants to be able to give these away. I want to highlight the push scooters. We did that last walk and roll and kids loved it. They're just like the little tiny, just regular scooters. The families thought it was really cool that we raffled those off. And then just kind of expanding how we used what we learned. We definitely, in the next slide, we definitely moved away from observations because they were just too taxing in our capacity. So we're trying site visits instead. This still allows us to see how the traffic is moving around the school, determine if there are any concerns with infrastructure or like unsafe driving behaviors, but we need less people to do it and it takes up less time. We are improving our processes all the time, but when we gave away bikes in 2023, we did it as a raffle, and that was far too chaotic because we didn't know how many bikes to bring or what sizes, and then parents and caregivers were unaware that they would be bringing a bike home that day, so we really cleaned that up. In March, we had families sign a waiver and sign up their kid with their name and their height. And then this month, we've brought the bikes to the kids as either a standalone event after school, or we've piggybacked on an existing event. Which brings me to Learn to Ride ahead of Bike and Roll to School. We really used April this year to prep for bike and roll celebrations. We wanted kids to have bikes, know how to ride bikes, and get basic bike tune-ups if they already had a bike. We just wanted them ready so that they can come and play and be confident and have fun. Some more lessons learned on the next slide. We have a language access plan. Our previous mayor had an executive order that requires all city agencies to have a language access plan for all community-facing services or information. Before we created this plan, we knew that we needed Spanish translation and interpretation. But after we really sat down and developed the plan, we realized that Spanish was actually spoken in more, how do I say this? More Spanish was spoken than English in our schools. So we also identified the top 5 languages spoken in our schools, which help us become more inclusive for our work. We also increased the stipend, which is a huge incentive for our teachers. We went from $250 to $500. Again, we wrote that into the grant. And it's for the training and for completing each semester. This is a great incentive for teachers who are already underpaid and overworked. We also are working on adjusting our message for age. We are bringing our first middle school onto the program this coming school year. I'm so excited, and we're working on developing a new module that has kids that so it's not cartoon, we want kids that look like them. we're working on ways to be more hands-on. So we're hoping that they can plan their own walk and roll event. These kids are older, and they can come up with really cool things. And then more staff. I was the only one working under this program when I first started. It really limited the work that I could do and the amount of schools I could take on. And last year we got a Safe Routes program administrator, Jeremy Saluga. I'm so happy to have him on the team. He's awesome. And it's allowed us to expand to more schools. So I said we started off with 3, we're moving towards 10, and this wouldn't be possible without an increase in staff. And then just kind of how to start your own teacher champion program. In the next slide, just some tips. Writing staff and stipends into the grant. Stipends are a huge incentive for teachers, and I don't know if we could have gotten as much participation without it. We have some teachers who are cyclists or big on pedestrian safety, but it's hard to ask them to do additional work for free. And staffing, critical to how many schools you can reach and ultimately the impact you can make on your schools. Create strong partnerships and relationships. Start developing relationship with the schools in your area, develop partnerships with bike shops, bike and pedestrian organizations, and any other advocacy groups that are working on the same things you are. They want to be involved in this work too. I mean, even Dinger, I mean, I don't mean to brag, but I've got his number, and he tells me he loves being able to do this every year with the kids. Or even Hope Cycle. Yesterday, I saw a grown man leap into the air after he saw a little girl finally figure out the pedals on the bike that he gave her. So they want to partner with you too. Prioritize equity. So just identify the high equity areas in your map, learn the culture because it's different from school to school, learn how to best communicate with your families, you know, really trying to create that culture of active transportation, and like, how do we figure out how that overlaps with the culture that already exists in each school community. Double the amount of planning time. We would first start planning for events 6 weeks prior. And this year I started planning for Bike and Roll in January. And I thought that was too early, but honestly, I could have started in December. Yeah, just make sure you give yourself ample room. And then my last point here, I say dream big. I know that might sound a little cheesy, but I started the presentation asking you how you could create the most epic Bike and Roll celebration. And that's kind of the place that I tend to start. I think having lofty goals is a key pillar to the work that we're doing, whether it's having a big purple dinosaur walk the kids to school, or doubling the number of bikes you give away, or even writing a seemingly lofty grant. You can make, you know, it's just a way to make walking and biking and rolling the most fun option. Yeah, and that's all I have. Here you have my contact information if you have any questions, but I think there's some time for Q&A.
Thanks so much, Priscilla. Yes, we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A box. And yeah, just so much excitement around the work that you all are doing in Denver. Thanks so much for walking us through that, you know, that whole process, and really showing, you know, how you all are able to craft this project and use it to, you know, try out some new ideas and then take those learnings and, you know, continue to make improvement. So really appreciate all the work that you were doing. There are a few people who were asking in the chat box what grant this was. This was a CDOT, Colorado Safe Routes to School grant. So for those of you who are outside of Colorado, I also have a few suggestions of grant opportunities that you all can look into if you want to do something similar, you know, in your school district or in your city. So there are ways to make this happen if you are outside of Colorado. Okay, a few questions I see here in the chat box. First question was, how did you find the teacher champions? Which I know you kind of talked about that a little bit, but any other information about how you were able to get teachers to sign up to be a part of this? What did that recruitment process look like?
Yeah, so I can kind of touch on my experience with adding more schools on. We did look at the like tier. Is it a community or neighborhood school? Is there any like infrastructure projects that are happening? Um, um, and I also like made this big spreadsheet on like what's the percentage of English speakers in the household, what's the percentage of free and reduced lunch or meals for each school. So we took that into consideration too to think about the need. And we also take into account like if there's already advocacy work happening. We've invited some schools on the program for next year who the parents are awesome and they started their own bike bus. So if we can come into the schools and share that curriculum, those modules, it kind of pairs really nicely together.
Awesome. I'm just gonna run down the list because there's so many questions in here. The next one is, was there any increased participation from the police department? Um, for any of the programs that you've worked on or any of the, studies or activities that you all had as a part of this project?
Yeah, we didn't, especially with the first three schools, we didn't really have any participation. Um, not a whole lot. Sometimes they would make it to some events, but that's because the teacher champions that I was working with, or any other people in the school that I was working with, they already had that existing relationship, and they asked them to come. And I kind of hesitate to get the DPD, the police department, involved sometimes just because of, I don't know how my communities will feel about that.
Yep.
Um, I really rely on if there's already existing relationships, I let the schools determine if they want to invite them.
Yeah, I love that. And you kind of mentioned it, at the end of your presentation, talking about like the culture that already exists, helping to guide the active transportation culture. So it's not like you're coming in and like establishing something new. And it's like, now we walk all the time, but it's really thinking about, what is the culture of this school, of this community, and then just kind of finding ways to, integrate and weave that in, like with the guidance of community members. So it does kind of create that sense of, ownership and belonging as opposed to just feel like something is being imposed upon you. So that's a really thoughtful approach that you all have going on.
Yeah.
How does programming differ between middle and elementary schools? I know you talked a little bit about like some of the changes to the modules, but anything else around the differences between the age groups?
Yeah, we're gonna find out together. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Our approach with I can tell you the approach with this new module. We're gonna still give them two modules. One of them is gonna be one of the existing ones that focuses on safe walking and uh, biking and rolling. So it has like a lot of the information all in one. That's cartoons. And then our new module, we want to be like real, I don't know what you call it, real people. And we're hoping to follow a kid or youth on their bike from home to school. So that's kind of how we're tailoring it, and all the things that could come up. And what if you pick up a friend along the way? So that's our approach for this next module. And then really, because they're older, they can do a lot of this work themselves. So thinking about what they want to do for walk and roll, or if they want to do a Ruby Bridges walk, or how they want to kind of integrate this and bring it to their classmates and their families.
Awesome. Yeah, I love middle schools too, so I'm looking forward to seeing what you all come up with when you expand the program. A few questions about how the teacher stipend process worked. So, were the teachers paid directly, or was like there a stipend that went to the school and then the school paid the teachers, or what was that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We paid them directly, so they each received the $500 or the 250 when we first started this program. They received the stipend and they didn't have to share it. So this is also a question I got from teachers, and then I realized I had to, like, on the flyer when I'm talking about it, I really got to be clear. This is per teacher. It's not shared, because I guess a lot of our teachers have to deal with sharing stipends for programs. So
Yeah, so that clear communication is, yeah, definitely an important part of this. And was the school district administration involved at all as far as selecting the teacher champions, or, were you all just able to do that on your own?
yeah, we did it on our own. I don't believe, like I said, the first 3 schools, they were picked before I started. And I don't think there was works with like the superintendent or any other administration within the school district to pick the schools. That definitely didn't happen when we invited more schools, but it's something we're trying to work with administration. We're trying to talk to the superintendent, but everyone's busy, so slowly but surely we'll get in there.
And last question, and I actually have a few more that I'll address in my final slide. So it's good that you all asked these because I was already going to answer them. So as far as I know that a part of the reason to do this project was to address some of the new infrastructure that was coming in, and also kind of do some more of these field studies and evaluation around safe routes to school. Was that something that was done in-house, or did you all work with outside consultants to do any of like the evaluation pieces, especially?
Yeah, so we have multiple people working on safe routes here in Dottie. I do the non-infrastructure, and then we've got John Johnson, who I think is in the chat.
Yep, I saw him in there. Hi, John.
Yeah, and so he works on he works in the infrastructure side of things, and then we kind of we work together. So he's able to say, hey, I've got a school, this stuff is happening. I think it would be really cool to pair up with them or ask them to be on this teacher champion program. So that's how we work together. But he definitely tells me the information, and then I run with it.
Awesome. And one just other question about paying teachers. So you were able to pay them directly, but they didn't have to become like temporary employees of the DOT. Like you were just able to offer the stipends directly to them.
Yeah, so I had to, within our system, I had to make them a vendor,
Okay.
and then I was able to pay them.
Yeah. So I assume if there's anybody on the call who's looking to do something like this, just checking and seeing like what the protocol is with your school district or your city. People might have different processes as far as handing out stipends and things like that. So it's definitely best to just, check and see what the procedure is in your community, and then proceed from there. Thanks for sharing that. And I have a few, just kind of like follow-ups to some of the things that Priscilla was sharing, especially if you're somebody who's, like not necessarily in Colorado or in a state that offers, these Safe Routes to School grants and some other opportunities that you all can look at. I saw somebody in the chat box mention, Safe Streets for All funding. And actually, I think they said that there isn't a lot of impetus for applying for Safe Streets for All funding in their community. So with just other ways you can access this funding. For those of you who don't know what SS4A is, you'll hear us talk about this a lot over the next few months. So this is a new source of funding. It's kind of almost like you can think of it as like a federal Vision Zero program. So it's, with the express purpose of preventing roadway injuries and fatalities. So it's a $5 billion investment over 5 years. It's available to communities who, either want to work on planning grants or planning projects or implementation projects. There are a few deadlines that are coming up in the next few months that I'll talk about. But this is an opportunity for you to, get some funding to do some really cool work when it comes to safe routes to school, whether that's working on, a road safety action plan, doing some demonstration projects. There are also implementation grants that are available. School districts are actually allowed to apply. So for the person who said that like their city might not be into SS4A, this could be an opportunity for you all to connect with your district, local school district or school districts to see if they would be interested in applying for a Safe Streets for All grant. We're seeing a lot of really interesting ideas around what to do with SS4A funds when it comes to Safe Routes to School, especially, walking school bus programs, bike bus programs, crossing guard programs. Our policy and program director said that teacher stipends can be included, are an eligible use of SS4A funds. So if you're like, oh, a teacher champion program sounds great, how do I find the money to, pay a teacher a stipend? That could be included in a SS4A project, even with, stipends for parents, or, volunteers who might participate in, Safe Routes to School events. All that's eligible through an SS4A project. Holding some of these walk and roll to school day events, data collection, like Priscilla, you had that great infographic that kind of showed the, impacts of your program. That's all eligible under SS4A. Some of the, traffic calming, demonstrations, again, that data collection piece to better understand the challenges of, walking, biking, and rolling, even using artwork to share safety messaging. That's also an eligible use of SS4A funds. So we've been encouraging communities to, definitely look into this opportunity. Again, it could be, your local government or school district is also eligible to apply. If you want to develop a, Safe Routes to School action plan as a part of a larger community action plan, that's eligible. So say you have a Vision Zero plan, you want to incorporate Safe Routes to School into that, and do a supplemental Safe Routes to School plan, that's allowable. Demonstration projects are also allowable. The key is that demonstration projects must be linked to an existing or a plan that's in development. So for example, if you got a grant to develop a Vision Zero plan, you can apply to do a demonstration project, or you can do two new grant applications. Let's say you apply to do a Vision Zero plan, and then you also apply for funds to do a demonstration project. That's all allowable as well. And these deadlines that are coming up for this current cycle, May 16th is the deadline to apply for implementation grants. So that's the only deadline for implementation grants. That'll be coming up in a month. And then the second deadline to apply for planning and demonstration grants will be May 16th as well. And there will be one more deadline in August. August 29th will be the deadline, will be the third deadline for applying for planning and demonstration grants. So again, if you're somebody who's, outside of Colorado and might be looking to do some of the, activities that Priscilla mentioned, there might be opportunities within your state, but there's also this SS4A funding that we're really trying to encourage communities to apply for and access. This is kind of a one-time, influx of funding. We don't know if it'll, be something that continues past these 5 years. So we're really encouraging people to, take advantage of that and apply for this now. If you have any other questions about SS4A, feel free to reach out to me. I also have a colleague who spends a lot of time working on the ins and outs of SS4A and can walk you through this process. If you have questions, or maybe you're, from a smaller community, or you don't have a grant writer, you've never done this before, they've really tried to make this application process as easy and seamless as possible. So any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me about SS4A funding. And then there was also somebody who's asking about engaging students with disabilities in Safe Routes to School. So we're actually having a webinar all about this topic next month for our final webinar for the Walk, Ride, and Roll series, May 17th. It will be at 2 p.m. Eastern. And we'll have a wonderful group of panelists talking about engaging and including students with disabilities in Safe Routes programs. So please feel free to sign up for that. I'll send out the registration link after this webinar is over. And I will also make sure that I drop my email address in the follow-up email, and I'll put it here in the chat box too, in case you all have questions for me about the conference, about Priscilla's work, SS4A, any and all things Safe Routes related. Feel free to reach out. So I think we are right at time. Thank you all so much for joining us. I really appreciate having you. A huge thanks to Priscilla and Denver and Dodie for all the work that you all have been doing to support Safe Routes to School. This is awesome and such inspiring work, and we look forward to seeing what's next when it comes to your Teacher Champion program. So thank you all so much. We'll see you hopefully on May 17th. Have a great start to Bike Month if I don't see you before I see you at the next webinar. And check out our follow-up email, which will be coming probably later on this afternoon. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.